Welcome all these people. In a few minutes, okay? Stephen, what do we have for excused absences, please?
Dr. Monroe and Mr. Henry Hostetler both requested excused absences.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, members of the board, what is your pleasure on approval of the agenda, please? Make a motion. That's better, thank you. I appreciate that. Absentees. I'm sorry, James. James got me straight. We have a motion to accept the excused absences. Is there a second, please? Second. Second. Okay, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Accepted the absences. Okay, now we'll move James to the agenda. Approval of the agenda, please. Motion made and seconded to approve the agenda. Darlene, second. James? Darlene. Okay, all in favor of agenda approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Approved. Stephen.
All right. Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board, and thank you all for being here tonight. We have two items on the agenda tonight. The first one is a rezoning. We have received a rezoning that is called the Hunsucker rezoning. This is, the applicant is Linwood Stroud and Matthew Hunsucker. This is located on Reedy Branch Road, east of Highway 11 on Reedy Branch Road. This is roughly 750 feet east of Ernest Lofton Road as well. It's a 41.33 acre site that is zoned agricultural residential, or AR. They are requesting an R10 conditional district with the condition that 10% of the future development will remain open site. Notification was posted on the site on November 6, 2024. Adjacent property owners and those within 100 foot were also mailed notification on November 6, 2024. This is the site that we are looking at today. It's in blue. This is Reedy Branch Road coming this way. This is Colonial Woods subdivision right here. This right here is Ernest Lofton. If you go about a mile to the west, you would hit Highway 11 running north to south. Church Street Extension, just to help provide a little bit of understanding where we're talking tonight. And then just to the north, we would look at Brookstone and South Brook as well. This is a meets and bounds rezoning map that just shows the location of the site. If we're looking at the existing land use in the area, it's greatly vacant or single-family detached residential. Again, you have Colonial Woods right here to the west of this site. To the north, you have Brookstone. Their second phase, which is just about to kick off just to the north. South Brook, which is currently vacant as well, but just about to kick off to the north as well. To the east, you have a vacant agricultural piece of land. You've got some single family adjacent to Reedy Branch Road in some of these areas, kind of rural residential sites. And then on the south side of Reedy Branch Road, mostly vacant, a few homes over there as well. Current zoning district within this area, again, we are looking at this site right here. This is currently agricultural residential. They are proposing an R10 conditional district in which 10% of the future development would remain open space. Right here we have Colonial Woods, which is to the west. This is an R20 zoning district. To the north, you have an R10 zoning district in Brookstone. You've got an R8 zoning district in Blueberry. You've got Southbrook, which is a PUD, but it's an R6 zoning district and a multifamily zoning district, both conditional districts. To the east, you've got agricultural residential, and to the south, it's greatly agricultural residential as well. The future land use plan designates this site as suburban residential. As you can see with all of this yellow, everything in this area is suburban residential. Once you get to the south of Reedy Branch, you have rural residential as well as a little bit of the easternmost section on this map as well. Suburban residential is defined as primarily larger lot, single-family detached residential. Again, diving a little bit deeper, low-density single-family larger lot residential. The potential zoning districts are typically R20, R15, R12.5, and occasionally R10 and R8 if additional open space or amenities are provided. The future land use plan and comprehensive land use plan defines open space as 10 to 30% open space, which is passive recreation, trails, playgrounds, amenity centers, fields, greens, as proposed within this rezoning. The typical use that you'll see in the suburban residential is primarily single-family detached residential uses with sewer service. Winterville's land use goals and economic development goals are to reinforce the town's identity as a family-friendly community. And in that, supporting rezonings to residential uses in the suburban residential and urban neighborhood areas as identified on the land use plan and land use map. We did receive one phone call that was curious of this proposal. They did not express whether they were necessarily for or against. They were trying to understand what the proposal was itself. Staff's evaluation. The 41.33 acre property is currently vacant and farmed land. The surrounding uses are dominated by single-family detached homes, upcoming single-family neighborhood subdivisions, and agricultural and vacant land. The comprehensive land use plan designates this area as suburban residential character area and supports an R10 rezoning with the condition that a minimum of 10% of the land is to remain open space. The request is consistent with the intent and purpose of the comprehensive land use plan, the future land use map, and is compatible with existing development and trends in the surrounding area. Staff recommends approval of the request to rezone the 41.33 acre site from agricultural, residential, or AR to R10 conditional district in which 10% of the future site must remain open space. Just to remind everybody in this room, tonight planning and zoning serves as a recommendation to town council. A public hearing will be scheduled at a future town council meeting. Eventually, town council will hold the public hearing prior to their decision. Does anybody have any questions for staff? Yes, ma'am. There are not guidelines. Yes, ma'am. In fact, it can be, as the future land use plan kind of states, it can be fields, greens, passive recreation, trails, things like that. But part of the intent is to lower the density of a subdivision as well and to provide those amenities within the subdivision too. Does anybody have any more questions before we open up to public comments? We also have the applicants here tonight as well. All right, thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll open it to public comment. Those that wish to speak in public comment are asked to come to the podium, speak into the microphone, state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes for your comment. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Stephen has a sign-in sheet for you also. So if the next person wants to sign in while this person speaks, that'll move things along.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Committee, town staff, and neighbors. My name is Matt Hunsucker, and I'm here on behalf of my father and aunt, who are the owners of the parcel located along Reedy Branch Road. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss our application to rezone this property from agricultural residential to R10 conditional district, with the commitment that 10% of the development area will remain as open space. We've thoughtfully crafted this rezoning request to align with the town of Winterville's comprehensive land use plan, which designates the area as part of the suburban residential character area. This plan specifically supports R10 zoning when open space is incorporated. We understand that any change to land use can raise questions and concerns, so allow me to address some of these key issues we've heard or that we anticipate. And of course, I'll make myself available for any questions or comments to you, neighbors, both during this hearing and afterwards. First of all, traffic. While development inevitably brings increased traffic, I want to ensure the committee and our neighbors that all future development will adhere to town and state requirements, including any necessary traffic studies or roadway improvements. These measures are designed to maintain the safety and flow for everyone. Also, I'm sure we may hear some concerns about water runoff and stormwater management. Managing water runoff responsibly is a priority of ours. Any development in the future will meet or exceed Phase 2 stormwater and soil erosion standards. This ensures the protection of neighboring properties and the environment. We are early in this process, so we do not yet have a finalized site plan. However, we are committed to working closely with town officials, engineers, and neighbors to ensure the eventual development is thoughtful and responsible. Tonight, we are simply asking for your approval of the rezoning so we can begin the next steps of planning and collaboration. In closing, I want to emphasize that this rezoning aligns with Winterville's comprehensive land use plan, supports balanced growth, and will contribute to the town's reputation as a family-friendly community. Thank you for considering this application, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the committee? Questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak for or against the rezoning? Anyone like to speak for or against? Make sure you sign in on the sign-in sheet.
Good evening, I'm Clifton Cahoon. I live at 3309 Davy Street in Colonial Woods. It's not rolling there. Okay. This is a development that was built in the late 80s. My lot is highlighted there. It is zoned R20, as is the undeveloped parcel off the end of our development. The lots range from 0.7 acres or 31,000 square feet to 1.4 acres or 61,400 square feet. The development and the other surrounding neighborhood lots are full of large trees that large lots can accommodate, which offers a feeling of privacy and seclusion. And R10 zoning results in a much different development style. Way here. This is a comparison of our development to an R10. This is Magnolia Ridge on Reedy Branch Road. The lot sizes are a third of an acre or 14,375 square feet versus Colonial Woods' average lot size of 0.9 acres or 39,200 square feet. That's 1/3 the size. R10 actually allows for 4.35 units per acre, lot acreage only. Colonial Woods is 1.1 units per acre. That's a fourth the size. R10 actually allows a lot that would be 1/6 the size of my lot. These are the lots that border the request for rezoning tract. They range from 0.72 to 1.54 acres, the smallest lot being 31,363 square feet. An R10 development is not an acceptable bordering density for us. We need much larger lots for transitioning and potentially a screening buffer along the common boundaries depending on the final lot sizing. In August of 2022, there was a rezoning request for the Evans properties you see highlighted in yellow here. I spoke in opposition to that request, as did most of the people that are here tonight. The board denied that request, and it hasn't come up for a revised request since. In closing, I urge the board to look at the lot sizes of this entire neighborhood area. The existing R20 zoning for Colonial Woods and the property behind it. And I respectfully request the same consideration now that we received 2 years ago. Thank you for your time. I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, okay, he'll leave the same one.
Click it or you can roll this.
Okay, either one.
Yes, sir.
My name is Dennis McCoy, live in 435 East Smith Avenue, Colonial Woods subdivision. I would want to address the drainage situation in this area, or also the lack of drainage in this area. First of all, maybe you can see this, but we're looking at this area right here, Roberts up there, and a neighborhood right there, Emily Drive right there. It's apparently a flooding area there. Also, there's an area, where's my pointer, but it's up north of Laurie Ellis Road, bordering Church Street and Barefoot Road, and that's a flooding area there. But you can see the green lines. I don't know if the green lines are as the drainage ditches that encompass this area, and you can see coming out of Winterville. Coming out of Winterville, you can see that coming down through there, comes over in front of Brookstone. Then the other one coming over from the northeast side, coming out of Winterville, coming through that area, or beside that area of South Brook. That flows on down to Church Street, and you can see, and that does carry a quite amount of water from that area, plus with that area coming out of Winterville. And then the other one that's more horizontal is coming from Old Tar Road over towards Church Street, and then, of course, that is on the north side of the Hunsucker land and the Evans land. Also, that little, you can't see it, but it's this line that comes kind of parallel to Church Street, and then comes and makes a pretty much a due east turn, and that is the canal, open water canal that flows behind the Colonial Woods subdivision. And if you can see that little square in there, that is Cliff Cahoon's property. And so also over there at the junction of all this drainage lines or canals coming together there at Church Street, there is this Church Street's pumping station site, and it has had, as required, due to flooding, a wet well has been raised higher in order to operate properly. So, this area that's coming out of, all this water flows down from Winterville, coming over from Old Tar, and as that water flows down, then that open drainage that comes from behind our Colonial Woods subdivision along Evans, it backs up. So it just cannot flow down in through there until those main streams recede in order to allow that water to flow. So this is the Colonial Woods subdivision. This is that square that I indicated, and this is, if you look to the left side, is the canal that goes on that north side, and then also it makes a right turn that goes behind the subdivision. This is very typical of a situation, and I mentioned to Cliff at one time, we did have a 7-inch rainstorm, and this is, and I don't know that this is it, but it's very similar to this. That property, or that trees in the background, is the Hunsucker land, and so, but that, so that's does occur, and so because of all that drainage and backed up that drainage, and then also this is going up Davy Street, the main street that comes through Colonial Woods subdivision.
Time. Please finish, please.
Anyway, so this is just pretty indicative of what we're situation with the flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of this gentleman? Anyone else like to speak for or against? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment period. I'd like to ask, what is the pleasure of this board? No.
And we'll go through the consistency statement first.
Just got a couple questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a couple questions on the flooding and traffic issues. Are they being addressed by Willis?
So that subdivision is not within the town of Winterville. There is a Pitt County drainage district that has some type of jurisdiction in this area. I'm not sure if it's within these lots. I don't know if, but there is a Pitt County drainage district in this area that does look at and identify some of the southeast drainage district that looks at some of the waterways in this area.
So before if Chris were approved, or they going to action, would they have to go through survey or?
Yeah, just to kind of give,
Codes,
right. Yeah, to kind of give you an overview of how that looks is during the next, if this was approved, if the zoning was approved, or actually whenever you're going to develop this property. So you look at the land as it stands right now, and you look at pre-development and post-development. So post-development, you cannot have more runoff than the pre-development, so the way it stands right now. So nowadays you'll see in newer subdivisions, typically ponds or some type of other stormwater control measure that will capture the rain and stormwater within it, within that proposed subdivision, so that when the new impervious is added, it is going to absorb the stormwater runoff. So they will have to meet state requirements for stormwater at the construction drawing phase.
Past history, as the follow-up in these type situations, children responsible for that.
I don't have the answers to that. I wouldn't have the knowledge either. I mean, it would probably take an engineer with extensive research on a certain site itself. But yes, every single new development will have to meet the state requirements for stormwater as is set today. Yes, ma'am. That would have likely been, if we raised, infrastructure in this area would likely be the town of Winterville, what he's referring to. So it could be that the town did go into some of our infrastructure and raise it when they were doing some type of work, absolutely. No, that would have been separate. It would likely have been either as a result to, I mean, for one, I'm not sure what exactly they're referring to, but the mayor's saying the pump station. It could have been that they were seeing some issues with it, or it could have been that they were just redoing the pump station and decided to raise it as well. Yes.
So I have two questions, actually. Do we know what year your subdivision was started, like what year?
Colonial Woods was late 80s. I believe the preliminary plat, or the final plats on it were around like 87. So most of the homes, I think, are kind of mid-90s. I think some into the early 2000s as well.
Do we know on average what the value is on those homes?
I do not.
I was just wondering. I know the gentleman mentioned earlier this year, we had that conversation with the Evans family. And I guess one of my questions might be, is there a particular zoning that would make it more accommodable for what you're interested in, if that makes sense? I know obviously R10 is not, but is there a particular zoning that would be to your liking besides the R20?
Mr. Killian.
I think that you're directing the.
Yeah, that's the question. One of them can answer. I guess the question is if it has to be similar to what they have, which is R20, that price point is far more expensive now than what it might have been 10, 15 years ago. So is there a zoning request that is not R20 that you would be okay with? I guess anybody can answer.
Please come up to the podium so we'll have it on. Thank you.
To begin with, we're not opposed to development. We realize that development, is going to happen, and the property owners deserve to make a profit off their property. But there's a big difference in 3/4 to 1.5 acre lots and R10 zoning lots at 1/4 to 1/3 of an acre. So what we're saying is that it's not necessarily that the whole property necessarily needs to be zoned way less dense. We need some transition. We don't want that kind of look, if you will, and those small lots backing up to our lots. So I don't know what can be done there. I would say R20 is what I'd like to see, because that's a 20,000 square foot lot at minimum. Our smallest lot is 3/4 of an acre. You know, R20 is 1/2 acre. So we just need some transition so that we're not looking at that type of development out the back windows. That's not what we wanted when we bought there. And the fact that it's zoned R20, albeit the late 80s, that was the plan, you know, for it to be rezoned. That's what the plan was for that area to be. Thank you.
Mr. Hunsucker, would you like to respond, please?
Thank you, Mr. Cahoon. I appreciate it. When Colonial Woods was constructed in the late 80s, part of the reason that it was R20 is because they're on septic. So their lots need additional septic field to absorb the sewer. This would be tied into Winterville sewer when it's developed, so that can accommodate lots that are more family friendly. And we do understand that they would prefer to have larger lots and perhaps a tree buffer, and we can talk about different remedies to that. But tonight, the only thing that's on the table is, does the rezoning request meet the Winterville land use plan? We believe that it does. We have set aside 10% open space to accommodate more of an open neighborhood feel and to continue the characteristic of the Colonial Woods subdivision. Even though it might not quite be exactly the density that they would prefer, we're trying to move in that direction. Thank you.
Also being said, the R10 is the minimum. Doesn't mean all the lots would be 10,000 square feet. They might be larger. I'm sorry, is someone speaking out there that needs to come to the podium? Any other people want to speak before we close the hearing? None? Let's have the pleasure of the board for the Hunsucker rezoning.
And we'll start with the consistency statement as well. And just to kind of remind the board, the consistency statement is reviewing whether the proposal is or is not consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. I've provided a template, whether you believe it is or is not, that you may follow if you wish.
So our action will be, in review of the Winterville Comprehensive Land Use Plan, the Hunsucker rezoning amendment is or is not found to be consistent with the Town of Winterville's comprehensive plan on November 18th, 2024. What say the board? To explain to the public, this is a brand new policy for us. This is the second month that we've had to deal with this consistency, so bear with us, please. We're dealing with just this consistency at this point. The Hunsucker rezoning amendment is or is not found to be consistent. That's what we want to vote on.
Mr. Killian,
Yes.
just for the board's knowledge, if somebody needs to make a motion whichever way in a second, and then you can vote on that just like we would anything else. One question on if there's one section that I consider not reasonable and all the other ones are,
I would ask you to look at the same sheet that I'm looking at. The first box under consistency, the decision. That's what we're considering at this point. We'll go to reasonableness afterwards. Just, this is all new to us, so we'll work together on it. But we'll deal with the first box under consistency. Is this Hunsucker rezoning amendment is found to be, is or is not consistent? I need a motion.
I make a motion that the Hunsucker rezoning request be approved based on
You, basically, if I may interpret your motion, you're saying the Hunsucker rezoning amendment is found to be consistent. Thank you. Is there a second to this motion? Second. Second by Morris, Sudden. James is the Morris. Any discussion? Hearing none, I would ask you to raise your hand if you support the amendment that this Hunsucker rezoning amendment is found to be consistent with the Town of Winterville Comprehensive Plan. Raise your hand if you're in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is unanimous. Okay, our next concern, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, we're going to go to reasonableness.
Yes, secondly, we will go to reasonableness, and to answer your question about the reasonableness, these 5 items, so for instance, number 1 says the size, physical conditions, and other attributes. Second one says benefits and detriments to landowners, the neighbors, surrounding community, etc. These are 5 statements that the state has said a town may use to consider whether it is reasonable or not. So you may, as a blanket statement, look at all 5 of these in consideration and not identify any 5 of them. Or yes, if there's one that somebody may say, I believe it is not consistent because of the benefits or the detriments to the surrounding property owners, then that can be kind of the reasoning behind a recommendation of denial. So does that answer your question? It can just be one. It does not have to be all 5, I guess is what I'm saying. You do not have to go line by line with all 5 of them. The ultimate question is on page 2. So in review of the Hunsucker rezoning amendment, the rezoning request is or is not reasonable and in the public interest, in that it allows for land uses that are harmonious with the surrounding, or not harmonious with the surrounding land uses, and uses in close proximity as found tonight by the Planning and Zoning Board. Right, yeah, that would be the decision tonight. Is it or is not harmonious?
Stephen, basically you're saying we can consider all these 5 boxes or just skip right to the
Correct.
last one?
Typically, if somebody was recommending denial, to provide kind of an explanation of denial, and it may be something, for instance, the detriments to the surrounding landowners and neighbors is a reason for denial. So typically you would use one of these 5 as an example of or a reason why you would be denying it. but you do not have to necessarily use one of these 5. Clear as mud, I know.
Gonna give the board a few minutes to digest that. If you wanna go through 1 through 5, or if you wanna go right to the box that says in review. Any-
One more, please.
Sure.
And what we complete here, is this something that town council will take into consideration?
They will, exactly. So, and that's another kind of, so the state now requires a reasonableness and consistency statement. We do it a little bit more direct. It can be an overall, we believe is consistent and reasonable, therefore we recommend approval of the rezoning. We do each of them individually so that we can consider each of them individually, but also so that if the Planning and Zoning Board does ever recommend denial on a rezoning, then they can explain the concerns, and it helps the landowner determine in the future if they do want to rezone, and also helps town council understand the thoughts and intent behind the Planning and Zoning Board's decision as well.
Data points of all these 5 sources, more.
Right, yeah. If you were saying, we think it's gonna be a detriment to the surrounding landowners, it's just not what is appropriate in that area, then it would at least provide town council and the owner of the land as well, kind of a little bit of information on the reason for denial.
Any more questions? Okay, I'm gonna suggest that we go to the final box in review of the Hunsucker's rezoning amendment. Rezoning request is or is not reasonable and in the public interest, and that it allows for land uses that are harmonious with surrounding land uses and land use in close proximity. I'd like a motion to accept or deny. Is or is not reasonable. It's our motion.
I make a motion that the request is reasonable for the Hunsucker rezoning amendment.
We have a motion by Morris Sutton that it is reasonable. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I would ask for a vote. If you are in favor that it is reasonable, I would ask you to raise your hand. It is reasonable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is not reasonable. 1. The vote is 5 to 1 that it is reasonable. We have one more box to check. Below that, the vote to approve or deny rezoning. In review of the Hunsucker's rezoning proposals, consistency and reasonableness, the Town of Winterville's Planning and Zoning Board recommends approval or denial of the rezoning request from Linwood Stroud and Matthew Hunsucker. I ask for a motion to approve or deny the rezoning. We have a motion to approve by Ms. Gardner. Seconded by Mr. Jones. Any discussion? I would ask those in favor of approving the rezoning to raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those that do not want to deny the rezoning, raise your hand. 5 to 1, it passes. Okay, Stephen.
All right, so our second agenda item tonight is a preliminary plat. The town of Winterville has received a preliminary plat for Copper Creek, Section 3. Copper Creek's applicant is Inner Banks Engineering, Marie Peden. This is located on Reedy Branch Road on the west side of Highway 11. This is a 12.8 acre site that is zoned R12.5. This is proposing 34 single-family residential lots, a street stubbed to the north, and interconnectivity with Copper Creek Section 2. This image shows the final plat, the preliminary plat layout on the land in discussion today. I've actually provided this in paper copy in front of you as well, just because it's a little bit easier to see. So this would be Copper Creek Section 3. Just to the south is Copper Creek Section 1. It's almost the exact size and shape of land as Copper Creek Section 1. It's almost exactly the same except for flipped. On the back side is Copper Creek Section 2. There is direct street interconnectivity with Copper Creek Section 2, connectivity with Reedy Branch, and again, a stubbed street to the north in which our future land use plan projects residential land there as well. This is an image of the final plat. Again, it just shows how the lots would lay out, the stub to the north, sidewalks along the street, along Reedy Branch, a berm, things like that. Town staff recommends approval of Copper Creek Section 3 preliminary plat as it has been reviewed and has received technical review committee approval. Of course, if approved, Copper Creek Section 3 will then submit construction drawings and eventually a final plat. We do have the applicant here if anybody has any questions, or if you have any questions of staff as well. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. On the Canopy Lane coming out, there's lot 83, 82, 81, and 84. What are proposed to be on those?
Single-family residential homes.
That single family just turned in a different
It
direction.
is, yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have the engineer here if anyone has a question. I have a question of the engineer. If you step forward and identify yourself, please. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marie Peden. I am the applicant for this project. I do live in Washington, North Carolina.
There was concern earlier about the water, not wastewater, but the
Stormwater.
stormwater. I remember either from this board's meeting or from the town board, but would you address that issue, please?
Yes, sir. What our plans have been from the beginning was we are on the downstream side of how Copper Creek Phase 1 drains through grass wells into an existing ditch that crosses this property. Because we are on the downstream side, we have to manage taking care of that water through our site or let it pass through. In working with the engineer reviewing the plans, we have determined that we are going to take the water from Phase 1 and it will be going through the pond, so it'll be piped to the treatment area. And then there's a portion of this Phase 3 less than the area of Phase 1 that's being treated that will run off at that low density area of 24% of impervious or less. So we're kind of balancing out how much water is being treated, but the pre-post is staying at that pre-development runoff rate. Considering all of the different types and levels of high density and low density. But we are gonna put in basins at the rear of the properties, in phase one. I can come up with because I know there's concern there. Lots 24, 25, 26, all through that area of phase one. That swale, the ditch, I don't think has been cleaned out much by the farmer. So it was detaining water, and that was what was causing that, those swales to not drain correctly, and it was backing up all the way into the road. So I'm not gonna say that the swale that is already existing, we're not managing it, but we are gonna put in a new drainage pipe, get rid of the ditch, put in the piping, and allow that water to go on off into our treatment facility for this site.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, what is the pleasure of the board concerning Copper Creek Section 3 preliminary plat? Anyone like to make a motion? We have a motion to approve the preliminary plat. Is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Sutton. Discussion, further discussion before we go to vote. Hearing none, what is the pleasure of this board? If in favor of accepting the preliminary plat, I would ask you to raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is unanimous, 6-0. Okay, we're gonna move right along to staff report.
Yeah, I don't have much for you guys tonight. We've spent a lot of time with each other lately, so I do always appreciate the time that you put in for the town and its citizens. It means a lot to the town, and we could not do it without you. As always, if you have any questions for staff, certainly let me know. Happy to assist or pass you to the correct person as well. But are there any questions?
You know, Stephen, I never let the meeting close without a question. Going out Davenport Farm Road, crossing Reedy Branch, there was a subdivision. What's the status of that subdivision that was applied for out there?
Davenport Farm Road past Reedy Branch. So Farmstead, near Pitt Community College, is that correct?
That's correct.
They have supplied some preliminary plats, have received the first round of TRC reviews, have not resubmitted for that yet.
Okay, thank you. So it's not totally dead yet.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Any other questions, Stephen?
I just have one last thing. It seems like there's a lot of development moving into this area, and there continues to be problems with drainage and traffic. I'm just curious as to how that's being addressed for land use.
Yeah, you know, we meet state statute on it. Kind of, I'll start with the stormwater. Only until recently has the state really started requiring stormwater infrastructure and stormwater review. As you look at the older neighborhoods, you could pretty much put a whole subdivision out and put a house on each lot, you know, impervious on each lot. Nowadays, there are a lot of stipulations and requirements of the state for new residential subdivisions and impervious caps per lots. So a lot of it is how the subdivision is actually designed. So some subdivisions are designed with a very large stormwater infrastructure, in which if I purchased a lot out there, not only do I have my house and my driveway, I could expand my driveway, I could put a patio in the back, I could put an accessory structure in the back, and I can keep going up, and depending on how it's designed. Some of them have very small impervious amounts in which you can put your house and your driveway and that takes up the impervious amount allotted by the design and how the state requires it to be designed. So I will say the state has changed impervious stormwater requirements significantly over the last probably 10 years, and even more over the past probably couple of years. As far as traffic goes, yeah, absolutely. With the amount of people that continue to move here, we're going to continue to see more people on the streets. Now, some of these streets are, there's something called there's a study that I include in each of the staff reports that shows a grade A through F for each roadway. Some of them have very low grades in which the road is actually designed for way more people. Some of them have maybe a D grade in which the state or the town really needs to start considering improvements onto that site itself, or onto that segment of road itself. But we are part of an MPO, and our metro is pretty much Greenville, Ayden, and Simpson. And we all meet at a few times a month at times, a few times a year, and we review projects and pretty much lobby our projects. So the town of Winterville is always there, the mayor is always there, and we are saying, we need this project, we need it funded, we need it as soon as possible. That then gets thrown into a bucket of the MPO and the state, and it's graded and determined whether we will receive funding for projects. Typically, here in the eastern part of the state, especially in this metro, it is very, very difficult because we're competing with Raleigh, we're competing with Charlotte, we're competing with Wilmington. So projects like Old Tar Evans widening was huge for us because that area is growing quickly, but that corridor especially would be a significant improvement in people coming in and out of Winterville itself. So it is a very complicated but long process when you're talking about traffic especially.
So even though we know that there will be traffic impacts, with the subdivision into creation or improvement to traffic, roadways may or may not be approved years later.
Or necessary even. So for instance, DOT is a reviewer on our projects. So a lot of times DOT will require a turn lane into a subdivision, so the subdivision will have to create a turn lane for it. And a lot of times they will say right out and no left turns out. That's something that we're seeing a lot of for newer subdivisions as well. It really just depends on the road, its capacity, and different design infrastructure from DOT as well. So some roads, again, like if you were looking at Reedy Branch in the section of the Hunsucker rezoning, has such a small amount of traffic right now. It is honestly nowhere close to meeting its design. So it has a significant ways to go before probably the town or the MPO would start really considering that for concern. Other areas like Mill, Vernon White intersection, Highway 11, that's one that the town is constantly begging, I mean it, begging NCDOT and our metro to find solutions and find funding for. So, and a lot of it changes every few years, but a lot of it isn't necessarily just congestion. over the years has turned a lot towards safety. Now, sometimes there's both, but safety is a huge component nowadays than just making sure people can get from point A to point B quickly. The NCDOT is focusing greatly on that they can get from point A to point B safely. If that kind of answers some of the questions. But again, in 4 years, the criteria will change some more. Somebody explained, and I don't know how true this is, but a traffic engineer and a planner was explaining to me one time that the Winterville, Greenville area is kind of at the point where we're getting so much growth that everybody is really focusing on the congestion right now. The people who live here and the people who've lived here for 10 plus years, who can see, you know, the traffic over time. And once we start getting some of the congestion solved, the next thing is going to be a public outcry for public transportation, being able to have multimodal travel, whether it's, you know, bike lanes and pedestrian walking lanes and safety across the streets and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting to hear a professional talk about the evolution of a community's desires when it comes to traffic as well.
Stephen, I'd like to voice an opinion of my own, and you can contradict me and tell me I'm wrong. Please do. I don't think it's a function of this board in considering rezoning, take into consideration traffic or stormwater. Those are engineering considerations that are not in the purview of this board. Is that correct?
I would tend to agree with you. Stormwater, they have to meet state requirements for, and then traffic, we try our best to keep DOT in the loop to let them know of growth oncoming. You've got to remember, though, in our metro, Winterville's still a significantly smaller town, and we grow a lot less dense than the city of Greenville. So it's, yes, it is adding cars to the street, but we are not one of the significant carriers of, or creators of the traffic. I'll say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I mean, this is good. Hearing none, comments from the board? That's pretty much it then. I entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Adjourn.
And I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. I forgot to say that, but absolutely. Oh.